Hello, good evening, everybody. I am back for our second interview here on the Emergency Online Wedding Business Summit for COVID-19. So, as you know, I was on earlier with Megan and we were talking about all things PR. Right now, I am joined by Leah Weinberg, and Leah owns a company called Colourpop Events, which is based in New York City, and it is a wedding planning company. And she's been in business now for 7 years. She has got amazing organizational skills, and she's known for being extremely calm in all of her communication with all of her clients. Just like most planners, she's got that ability to multitask. And she really honed these skills because in a previous life, she was a real estate lawyer. So there are some elements there which I think she brings across here. And today she's going to be talking to me about understanding the psychological impact of postponements and cancellations on our couples. And I know there are a lot of people who have had a lot of questions about this particular topic. So I thought it was a good one to bring Leah on really early and get some of these questions answered. So Leah, thank you so much for being
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. Now, I know you do have a bit of a disclaimer before we go ahead. So I'm just going to let everybody know that basically one of the things that Leah and I discussed was that she's not a psychologist, she's not a psychiatrist, she's not a therapist, and she's not a medical professional either. So please don't take advice. This is to help you in your wedding business to really just navigate some of the challenges that you're coming up against and facing right at the moment. So, Leah, welcome. Thank you very much, like I say, for being here. I really would like to ask you some questions around the whole psychology, because as I say, I know this is something that a lot of people have been worried about. They're not sure how to navigate this. There's a lot of challenges, etc. And I mean, at the end of the day, weddings are complicated enough without adding this into the equation as well. So from a sort of psychological perspective, what advice can you give us?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, as a baseline, weddings are incredibly stressful. There's a lot of high anxiety. There's a lot of sort of strange issues that couples face just planning a wedding in general that they may not encounter normally, whether that's issues with family, finances in terms of who's paying for the wedding, things that the couple realizes that they care about that they didn't think that they would, people behaving weirdly, just all sorts of, It's just bizarre. I always, my phrase is like everything gets weird when it comes to weddings. And so adding something like coronavirus into that equation is just blowing things out of the water for couples. So it's increasing a lot of stress and anxiety for people. The couples are also having to, particularly for some people that may have already sent out invitations and are having to reschedule, they are having to deal with reactions from family and friends who are guests and having to rearrange their things. So there's a lot of pressure on couples from outside sources, as well as sort of the internal things that they're battling in terms of having to make this decision, because that's a really postponing or canceling is a really devastating decision. And on top of everything that these people have already gone through, I mean, some people have been planning their wedding for a year and a half, 2 years maybe, and for it to not happen the way that they planned is intense.
Yeah, no, that's all understood. So that, there's a lot of emotions you're dealing with here, as you say, not just from the couple themselves, but also from guests, friends, family, etc. So when you do add all these emotions and all these different dramas into the equation, what are the emotions that the clients themselves are experiencing? And do you have any tricks of the trade in how you actually navigate some of this? What are some of the things that people can be doing to smooth things over, to reassure as well? Because as professionals, that's, especially if you're planners, that is part of your job.
Yeah, there's two particular things that couples are facing right now that may not be as obvious. Like, obviously, there's the stress and anxiety of the unknown and potentials with, money and everything like that. But the two things that I think couples are feeling that we as vendors need to realize, the first one is guilt. So I have been chatting with some of my couples who are facing the decision of postponement, who are determining what they want to do, and they feel guilty about they're feeling bad about their wedding in the larger scheme of things. And so, like, you know, most people realize it's a global pandemic. People are very ill. They are not surviving. And so people on the ground here are worried about a wedding, which the couple, like, which people who are sort of self-aware and understand big picture things, for them, they feel guilty about feeling that way about their wedding when there's so much going on in the world. I think that it's okay for them to feel bad. And we as vendors and planners particularly need to give them the permission to feel what they're feeling. Let them know that it's okay. Say, you know, yes, it's great that you are thinking about what's happening and how your wedding fits into this bigger picture, but you are 100% right in feeling what you're feeling, and you can feel bad. So to add a little humor to the situation, so I'm a big fan of John Oliver, and he recorded an episode this past Sunday. And one of the things that he did, he brought this up. So he brought up the fact that, like, there are some times, and not to call weddings petty, but he brought it up in the terms of, like, sports teams, like his one of his favorite football teams, their season got canceled and they were close to, like, winning the title. And he's like,
I'm an husband.
Yes.
That's exactly the same thing. He is a big Leeds United supporter.
Yes.
And everyone else is worried about all these different things, and all he can think about is how Leeds aren't going to get promoted now.
Yes. So John Oliver set a 30-second timer on his show and said, all of you, I'm giving you 30 seconds to just vent about the most trivial thing that you can. And he went on and on for 30 seconds about the team. And so, you know, it's like, our clients should know that they should have this little period of time where they can sit in it. They should feel it and shouldn't feel bad about what's happening. Like, they've put a lot of work and effort into planning something, and for it to not be happening is a huge, huge deal for them. And then the other thing that has come up in talking with people is that it's almost like grieving. So they're kind of having to, particularly with people who are canceling just outright, they are grieving the loss of something that was very big and very important, and people planning weddings, that becomes the center of their lives for the period of time that they're planning. And so we have to understand that, like, couples are kind of going through a grieving process here in terms of making this decision and then having to face the reality of weddings either not happening when they thought they were, looking different. So for people that are maybe doing much smaller things or just eloping, or people that are canceling outright, it's a loss. And so I think being understanding of what couples are going through and giving them the permission to feel what they feel is really important for us to do.
No, I agree. And as you said just then, that really sums it up nicely. You always need to be the person that gives them permission to actually grieve the fact that their wedding isn't going ahead, and letting them know that that's okay. Because as you just said, we all have those little things. And I'm certainly not saying a wedding is little or trivial or any of those things, but we all have those things where we're thinking, oh no, I'm not going to be able to do whatever it might be. And then you have that feeling of going, oh, that's really selfish. There's people dying there. And I'm thinking about, I can't do X, Y, Z. But like you say, it's really giving them that permission. It's being realistic as well. We are human beings and we do have feelings. And I think if you don't actually allow that process to happen, it can actually be worse. I mean, as the Wedding Academy, we train newbies who are coming into the industry, and you've got no idea how many of them come to us because they planned their own wedding and they feel like they've got this big hole in their life afterwards. So I kind of resonated with what you were saying about the fact that there is a grieving process there, because there is, in the general scheme of things, when you finish planning it, it's like, oh no, what am I going to do now with my Friday evenings and my weekends and my lunch breaks and what have you? So it is a very similar thing. But it's not just about emotions, is it? It's about money as well, because obviously there are huge sums of money involved here. So what sort of things are you seeing from clients with regards to the money side of things, and how can we deal with that as wedding professionals?
Yeah, money, just even, like I said, outside of this, money causes so many stress outside of weddings, but even just weddings in general, like, it's large amounts of money to be spending. It is scary to spend that much money sometimes when you have other things, that adds a whole new dynamic to the situation as well. But in this situation, when couples are facing postponement and cancellations, they are facing the possibility of losing money, having to pay additional money depending on when they are rescheduling dates for. I definitely think a lot of vendors are being incredibly flexible and generous in terms of rescheduling. I will say one of the things that I've just been seeing and talking with other vendors in the community, that there is less flexibility when people are rescheduling for 2021, because that's sort of taking away potential popular dates for us and lost income there. But I do know that people are being incredibly flexible in terms of rescheduling for within 2020. But couples they're kind of going into crisis mode. Some are panicking, some are trying to figure out how to get their money back, or potentially how to spread out payments. So there's a lot that we can do as vendors. I mean, obviously we do need to protect our bottom lines, because if we go out of business, that's not good for anybody. So we need to protect the money that we have going in, but consider being more flexible. And couples can also be flexible too. So I've seen companies where they've postponed events, and instead of collecting their final payment on the original due date, they're collecting it closer to the event, but then maybe splitting it up so that the company can get a little cash flow now, finish it up then. But we have to just expect that couples are going to ask us questions about refunds and how to navigate that. And for them, it's coming. I mean, I know we could do a whole series on like the emotions behind discounts and how vendors respond to like being asked to discount things. I think it's important that we understand now that clients' requests for payment schedule changes or refunds is kind of coming from a place of fear for them. So it's important that we recognize that, but also know we need to figure out what our policies are. So kind of before we're being put in those situations, it's helpful to establish baseline rules for ourselves. So that way we take the emotion out of it and we know, okay, like for me, I've said anybody that's rescheduling for a 2020 date, I'm not charging any additional fee or any change fee or anything like that. If we are looking at 2021 dates, that becomes a different story, and they have a heads up on that. So that way I now have this hard and fast rule that this is how I'm moving forward with people rescheduling this year. And that takes the emotion out of it. We shouldn't be offended when those questions happen, because couples are panicking. I mean, some people, if they have made the decision to cancel their weddings, they might not even be able to, that might be a real problem for them. And particularly couples who maybe are out of work, like if they're freelancers or potentially in the restaurant industry, they may not have an income. So they may be terrified about what the future is for them financially and how they could even afford to postpone the wedding.
Which brings me to another question. There's the whole argument for postponing versus cancellation. So obviously postponing is going to be the more viable option from a business standpoint. And by the way, I really like the idea of taking the emotion out of it, and remembering that this is a business and the questions that people are asking are perfectly within their rights to ask. You can't get offended. But how can you advise somebody on whether or not it's going to be better for them to postpone or cancel? Sort of what are the rules around that you're seeing at the moment, and how are you advising your clients? You mentioned then that you've got some set rules, ground rules for yourself, which is an excellent idea, but this is fairly unprecedented. It's new territory for most people. So how are you setting the rules and boundaries around whether or not you recommend to somebody to cancel or to postpone?
Yeah, there's two things that I want to mention there. The first one is that I think we as planners need to be very careful about how we are phrasing the guidance that we're giving, because somebody posted a really great example, because it's definitely possible. Like, let's say a planner recommends keeping the says, I think you'll be okay, let's keep the wedding on. And then the wedding happens, or like it's, they decide to ignore sort of the recommendations, because in a lot of places, like in the US, things aren't mandates yet. They're just recommendations and guidelines. So like, let's say a planner says, let's keep the wedding on. We're going to just soldier on without and not adhere to the guidelines. And in that case, what happens if somebody gets sick? at your wedding. And then they turn back to the planner and say, well, you told us we should keep it on. So, that's liability on our part. So we need to be very careful. The thing that I have heard some friends of mine saying, which I think is amazing advice, is that we should support our clients in whatever they decide, give them the tools. So like help them, gather contracts, point to the applicable language that they should be reading in the contracts, but we should not be making recommendations whether to go forward or postpone. It should just be, we are here to give you all the facts. We are here to support you in what you decide, but ultimately it's the client's decision. And then the second point that I wanted to mention, because there is a huge push, I've seen tons of things online about, save events, get everybody to postpone, not to cancel. And there is an important thing.
That's a big message out there, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's a component to that I really want to make sure professionals understand, which is we don't know if postponing is actually in the best interest of our clients. So particularly from like a psychological and mental health perspective, I can imagine situations where I planned my own wedding. I'm here because like I enjoyed the wedding planning process and I like what I do.
You're one of my students.
Yes. But for some people, we have to understand that like the wedding planning process can be excruciating. It can be extremely stressful, a lot of high anxiety. It can trigger people with depression. If there are family issues that are popping up, like it could be a whole other animal that we don't understand. And so for some people, the thought of having to keep planning a wedding for like 6 months, 9 months, even another year might honestly be like too hard for them to handle mental health wise. And so having a vendor pushing them to postpone or sort of like, I don't want to say guilt trip, because that's kind of I don't want to be that negative or harsh, but like making somebody pointing out that like wedding vendors need to get paid and it's better to postpone than cancel might put a little too much pressure on somebody who it needs to frankly be done with the wedding planning process. And they need to just like go to City Hall, be done with it, because having to face even more wedding planning might be really detrimental to them. So what I am saying in my new messaging is to try to encourage, like share the benefits of postponing rather than canceling, but only if that is right for your client. We need to be listening to our clients and like what they are equipped to handle and make sure that we are supporting them in that decision either way.
And it really is an emotional minefield, isn't it, at the end of the day? Because it's not I don't think that's probably one of the first things that people think about with this whole challenging situation that we've got here is exactly what you said. For some people, planning their wedding, the biggest ball ache known to man, and they just want to have the day, enjoy their wedding, but be done with the planning side of it. And then there's all the psychological issues. We always talk about the fact, because we're in the industry and we love the industry and we love what we do, we can't imagine not doing it. So therefore, it can be very hard, can't it, to put yourself into the shoes of somebody who actually hates it. They're highly stressed. They've become this person that doesn't sleep at night and is arguing with their family over the most ridiculous little things. So I think the advice there is really key about making sure that you don't push somebody, however inadvertently, down a specific avenue. You've got to let them make the decisions, and definitely, as you say, give them those tools to help them make those decisions, because dealing with anyone's emotions, even as a qualified professional, I'm sure is not easy. But we aren't, as we said right at the beginning of this conversation, we're not psychiatrists, we are not medical professionals, so navigating anyone's emotions is a very tricky thing to do. And you've given us some fantastic advice there. And if I could ask you to sort of round off what you really have been experiencing here and sort of your final advice for people as they deal with the postponements, the cancellations, the oh my God, what am I going to do about the money scenario? Can you sort of just give us some final words of advice that you would like to leave everybody with as they work through this situation?
Yeah, my advice is to lean on your friends, lean on your vendor friends, because we are all in this together. Yeah. And honestly, I have found so much joy in having like virtual chats with my friends at this point when we can't necessarily see each other in person. I have been on the receiving end, and I have been making phone calls myself with people that just want to talk through issues. And like bounce ideas off of each other. So being available for each other and really making sure like we're physically isolated. So it's really important that we don't necessarily like socially and mentally isolate ourselves as well.
Yeah.
And just keep in mind, like, keep in mind that we have to take care of our clients. We also have to take care of ourselves. So that's incredibly important because this is a lot for us. We're having equal stress about what the future of our businesses are, what the future of the wedding industry is.
We're being told to help all these other people and, be the guidance, be everything else. But at the end of the day, we're also human beings as well. And we're all concerned about our own survival and our own businesses. So yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, just like we're giving our clients permission to feel what they're feeling, it is completely valid for us to be feeling what we're feeling. But I really do think that like reaching out to friends who are going through the same thing, being active with them on social media, just in terms of like interacting. One of my things is like, if social media and the news is overwhelming you, stay away from it. Like,
yeah, definitely. Do
sort of the bare minimum to make sure you stay informed. But like, if it's causing you anxiety, like just don't engage in it. So, yeah, there's lots. It's a wild time right now, and we're all just trying to get through it.
Absolutely. And even the most positive people, and I'm a pretty positive person, but I've got to the point now where I stream the radio and I love listening to the radio. I'm a classic FM girl. It's a radio station we have in the UK, and I stream it all the time because words annoy me when I'm trying to write. So I like classical music, but I've got to the point where at the top of the hour, when the news comes on, I have to switch it off because it makes me depressed. And I'm a very positive, person normally, but even I've got to the point where enough, I don't want to hear it. I heard it first thing this morning. I don't want to hear it on the hour, every hour. So
yeah,
I've got to the point where it's self-preservation. No more. I don't want to hear it.
Yesterday I texted a friend and I was like, did you hear that in the afternoon? I said, did you hear the news about San Francisco? She's like, Leah, that's old news. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm just like trying to limit. She's like on it 24/7. And I'm just like, I can't. So I'm picking it up as needed.
Yeah. I can't. And I think your advice about reaching out to others who are going through a similar thing is really, really good advice. As we said, we've gotten a huge amount of responsibility on our shoulders as far as our clients are concerned. But remembering that we need to be supported as well is huge. So my advice would certainly be use those Facebook groups out there, use online summits like this to chat, which reminds me, I've completely ignored all the comments. So I'm very sorry, everybody. I was so into what we were talking about, and we've got Sylvia and Gillian really engaging with us, and Melina's in Italy, and she's having some very tricky conversations at the moment with her destination wedding couples. And I sympathize. I mean, being in Italy, you absolutely would be. And people are enjoying the information. Oh, Sylvia's saying she loves classical music too. I do, until they put the news on. But yes, make sure that you reach out to people in Facebook groups. The one thing about the wedding industry is we do have some amazing groups that are there for us to participate in, engage in, and be a part of. And I think more than any other time now, don't be afraid to ask questions either. If you're stuck and you are in a situation that you just don't know what to do with, ask the question, jump to one of these Facebook groups, message us here. We will more than happily, if we don't know the answer, we'll point you to somebody who will know the answer. But I think don't be, as Leah said, stuck, isolated on your own, feeling like there is nobody else to help you. We're all here. And as long as we can stream the internet, we can support each other. So definitely look after yourself. Yeah, fingers crossed. I didn't have an internet issue just before Leah and I came on live. And yes, I think my satellite internet has given up the ghost. I think there's just too many people online. So I'm furiously grabbing any device that has any kind of internet on it at the moment to stream. But other than that, we're all good. So Leah, thank you very much for taking time to come in and share your advice and to really give us some insight into what's happening in your business, how you're managing these emotions. And I'm sure Leah won't mind if people follow you and if they've got any follow-up questions that they need to ask. What would be the best way of reaching you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anybody, I'm happy to chat with anybody. So again, if anybody wants to Skype or FaceTime with additional questions, you can email me at Leah@ColorPopEvents to set something up, or my handle on all social media is @ColorPopEvents. So I would love to hear from you. This is a topic I enjoy chatting about. And it's becoming all the more relevant in these times. So I'm happy to help however I can.
Definitely. And thank you very much for being so generous and sort of being there for everybody, because as we said, this is not something that is normal. It's not something any of us have been through before. And actually, before I let you go, a question that it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on is, obviously none of us can prepare for something quite like this, but my husband actually is in risk management. And so he is always about the risk assessments and what have you. I'm not. I probably should be more, considering who I'm married to. But what could we be doing? So using this as an experience to learn from and grow from, what would be your advice about how we can ensure that we're more ready for something like this happening again? I mean, we've had so many natural disasters and things that are happening over this last, 5 or 6 years, that really one of the biggest things I always take away from something like this is, how can I learn from this experience and what can I do to protect myself in the future? And I'm sure you must have thought about this, because you've been setting goals and guidelines for yourself. So cheeky last question there before I let you go.
Absolutely.
What advice do you have?
There's two things that I think are absolutely critical. The first is to revisit your contract, your service agreement, hire an attorney. So I used to be an attorney, but this whole thing, and my contract is always like way more thorough than any other vendor contract I've seen.
I bet.
But I am still using this time to hire a small business attorney to review my contract, to just make sure there are no holes. So I am fortunate in terms of the way that my contract is worded. It gives me a lot of financial protection with any clients that need to postpone or reschedule for any reason. And then at that point, it becomes my discretion in terms of how I want to be flexible on those. So getting an attorney to take a look at your contract, because I've seen a lot of vendor contracts, and that's also what I'm doing for my clients now. I'm reviewing every single one of their vendor contracts to see what it says about these situations. And some are silent, some are better than others, some don't offer the vendor a lot of protection. So that's my number one. And then my number two, I totally lost my train of thought. Yes, got it. Got it. Number two is to think about other sources of income for you. So I know a lot of people, some people have podcasts, so they get advertising revenue through that, which is fantastic. Some people do online courses, which is wonderful. I'm personally working on a book. So once that is out, that I will have some potential revenue from that. So really focusing on what you can do to diversify your business within areas that are part of your expertise. So I'm not encouraging people to like go out and launch some brand new component to their business that has nothing to do with like their skill set or what their core business is, but take a look at like what you're good at and what you could be doing right now.
Yeah, so diversifying is a really good idea. But as you say, the last thing you want to do is detract from your core offer. It needs to really enhance what you do. But instead of having all your eggs in one basket, if something like this happens, then it allows you, obviously, to have those other streams of income, so it's not quite as desperate. Demetria is saying here, I'm using humor in my communication with clients, sharing with them the situation in my country and asking them news from their country. Whoops. And trying to, sorry, my finger keeps going over the button, and trying to keep them under the feeling that we're a family here, which I think is really, really good. That's something that, we don't want all the doom and gloom. Like I said, I have to turn the radio off because it just gets too much after a while. So I think humor is important. It's not that we're making light of a serious situation, but even if you think back to times like the Second World War, one of the reasons we all got through that was having a sense of humor, and being able to actually get through those tough times and bandy together and what have you. So having a sense of humor is not a bad thing. Is there time to quickly address force majeure clauses? Sama, I do have somebody coming on tomorrow. Caroline is coming on tomorrow, and she is a legal whiz. That is her area of expertise. I don't feel that I've got enough knowledge to be able to answer any questions on that, and I would hate to give you any advice that was wrong. So that's why I've brought Caroline in. So if you tune in tomorrow, it is at 3 p.m. GMT, which I believe is 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time and 8 a.m. PST. Yes, that's right. 3 p.m., 11 and 8. God, it blows my mind, all these time zones. How are you advising your clients to, another one about forced dementia? Okay, yeah, so Randy and Sama, tune in tomorrow. And if you can't tune in tomorrow, all of the replays from all of these videos are on our dedicated page on our website. So I have created one page which lists all of our speakers. And as soon as I have completed an interview with one of them, the cover for the interview video changes, and there's a little green button on it that says click here to watch, and it will go straight to the YouTube recording of these interviews. So stay tuned on those pages. You don't want to have to keep searching for it everywhere, so we've made it really easy for you. I'll also, if you're on our email database, every morning you will receive an email where we will let you know about the highlights from the previous day's speakers and who you can expect coming up that day. So we are trying to sort of keep it together as much as possible and make it as easy as we can for you. But if you do have any questions when you've seen what speakers we've got coming up, absolutely feel free to email us your questions and I will add those to the list for the speakers. So Leah, thank you so much. I know I said I was going to let you go last time, but then I just suddenly had that. You know what, I'm going to ask you anyway.
Thank you for putting this together. You've got a really comprehensive group of speakers for this, and I know it was hard to put together and a lot of work, so thank you for mobilizing so quickly with all of this.
It's been lovely to meet all of the people that I'm meeting virtually. I know some I don't know. So for me, it's always interesting. And as I say, I really don't feel equipped to answer some of the questions. And that really is something that you guys should be thinking about as well. Like I say, if something comes up and you don't know the answer to it, don't guess, really don't guess. Ask the question, ask somebody who does know, which is why we've put this summit together. So on that cheerful little note, I will leave you all until tomorrow. Have a fabulous evening or day, wherever you are in the world, whatever your time zone is. And I will be back here tomorrow with Caroline, and we'll be talking all things contracts and legalities to do with the coronavirus. Leah, thank you once again, and I will see you guys tomorrow.